Get out. You've always been a failure. You can't even give me a child. Those words cut deeper than any physical wound ever could. I stood there, tears streaming down my face, as Jordan threw my hastily packed suitcases onto the front porch of his parents' house, the place I'd called home for the past 4 years. Just 3 days earlier, I had lost our baby. Again. The third miscarriage in less than 2 years. Each time, a piece of my heart had been ripped away, but I never imagined my husband would blame me for it. Not like this. Jordan, please. My voice cracked as I reached for him, but he stepped back, his eyes cold and unforgiving. I want a family, Ruby. A real family. And you? He gestured at me dismissively. Clearly can't give me that. The door slammed in my face, leaving me alone on the porch as the evening rain began to fall, matching the tears that wouldn't stop flowing. I had no family to turn to. Both my parents had died in a car accident shortly after I'd met Jordan, and my only relatives, distant aunts and uncles, lived on the opposite coast. I'd given up my college education, my friends, and my independence when I'd married him. Now I had nothing. That first night was the longest of my life. I found shelter in a 24-hour diner, nursing a single cup of coffee until dawn, trying to ignore the pitying glances from the waitstaff. My body still ached from the recent miscarriage, and my mind replayed Jordan's cruel words on an endless loop. When morning finally came, I found myself dialing a number I hadn't called in years. My fingers trembled as I waited, praying he would answer. Hello? The deep, familiar voice brought back a flood of memories. Louis, I whispered. It's Ruby. There was a long pause. Ruby? Are you okay? You sound... I'm not okay, I admitted, my voice breaking. I need help. Louis and I had met in college. We'd had a brief but intense relationship before I met Jordan at a bar during my sophomore year. I'd been swept away by Jordan's charm and confidence, dropping out of school and leaving Louis behind without a proper goodbye. It wasn't my proudest moment. Where are you? Louis asked without hesitation. Downtown, at Mabel's Diner. Stay there. I'm coming. 2 hours later, I watched through the diner's window as a silver Volvo pulled into the parking lot. Louis stepped out, and my breath caught. He looked older, more serious than I remembered, with flecks of gray at his temples that hadn't been there 5 years ago. But his eyes, those kind brown eyes, were exactly the same. He spotted me through the window, and our gazes locked. For a moment, I felt a wave of shame so powerful I almost bolted out the back door. But then he smiled, just slightly, and I knew I had made the right call. You look like hell, were his first words as he slid into the booth across from me. Despite everything, I laughed. Always the charmer. His smile faded as he took in my disheveled appearance more carefully. What happened, Ruby? I told him everything. About the miscarriages, about Jordan's escalating coldness after each one, and finally, about being thrown out with nowhere to go. What I didn't tell him was how Jordan had changed from the charming man I'd fallen for into someone I barely recognized. How the control had started small, suggestions about my clothes, my friends, my time, and grew until I had nothing that was truly mine anymore. I'm a doctor now, Louis said when I finished my story. Pediatric surgeon. I live in Riverdale, about an hour from here. I know, I admitted. I saw your name in a medical journal article once. I was proud of you. I live alone, he continued. Have been since Olivia died. I blinked in surprise. Olivia? My wife. His eyes clouded briefly. Cancer, 3 years ago. I'm so sorry. He shook his head. I have a spare room in my apartment. It's yours for as long as you need it. Louis, I can't. You can, he said firmly. And you will. Friends help friends, Ruby. Friends. After what I'd done, walking away from him without a backward glance, he still considered me a friend. The relief washed over me in a wave so powerful I couldn't speak for several minutes. As we drove to his place in Riverdale, I watched the familiar landscape of my married life disappear in the side mirror. I felt hollow, empty, but also, strangely, lighter. Like I was leaving behind a weight I hadn't known I was carrying. Louis's apartment was minimalist but comfortable. clearly the home of a busy professional who spent more time at work than in his living space. The guest room was small but clean, with a window overlooking a park. "Get some rest," he said, setting my suitcases by the bed. "Doctor's orders. We'll figure things out tomorrow." That night, curled up in an unfamiliar bed in an unfamiliar room, I cried until I had no tears left. Not just for the babies I had lost, but for the person I had lost too. The independent, hopeful young woman who had once had dreams beyond being Jordan's wife. As exhaustion finally pulled me toward sleep, a disturbing thought flickered through my mind. Something about the timing of my miscarriages. Something about Jordan's behavior before each one. A pattern I hadn't noticed before. The morning sickness tea he'd insisted I drink. His mother's family recipe to help with the symptoms. The sudden business trips that coincided with each of my pregnancies. Returning with special vitamins he said would help. The strange, almost satisfied look in his eyes when I doubled over in pain that third and final time. I sat bolt upright in bed, my heart pounding. No, it couldn't be. Jordan wouldn't. He couldn't have. But what if he had? What if my miscarriages weren't my fault at all? What if they weren't even accidents? Sleep eluded me that night as my mind raced through every detail of my pregnancies. Each time, Jordan had been so attentive at first, bringing me special teas, preparing my meals, insisting on giving me vitamins himself. And each time, within weeks, I'd lose the baby. The morning light was barely filtering through the curtains when I heard Louis moving around in the kitchen. Wrapping myself in the borrowed robe he'd left for me, I joined him. "You're up early," he said, sliding a mug of coffee across the counter. Couldn't sleep. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug, drawing comfort from its heat. "Louis, I need to ask you something. As a doctor." His expression grew serious. "Of course. Is it possible to cause someone to miscarry? Deliberately?" The question hung in the air between us, terrible and heavy. Louis set his own mug down carefully. "Ruby, what exactly are you asking me?" The words tumbled out, my suspicions, the patterns I'd noticed, Jordan's behavior before and after each loss. As I spoke, Louis's expression darkened. "There are substances that can cause miscarriages, yes," he finally said. "But Ruby, that's an extremely serious accusation." "I know," I whispered, tears forming in my eyes. "I know how it sounds. But the more I think about it—" Louis was quiet for a long moment. "Let me make some calls. I have a colleague in obstetrics who might be able to help." 3 days later, I found myself in Dr. Jean Brown's office. She was a petite woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner that immediately put me at ease. "Louis explained your situation," she said, gesturing for me to sit. "I'd like to run some tests if that's okay with you." I nodded, still not entirely convinced of my own suspicions, but desperate for answers. The next week was a blur of blood draws, examinations, and anxious waiting. Louis drove me to and from each appointment, never pushing me to talk, but always there if I needed him. One evening, as we sat in his living room sharing a pizza, the first real food I'd had an appetite for in days, I found myself talking about my life with Jordan. "I don't even know when things changed," I admitted. "He was so charming when we met. I was completely swept away." "I remember," Louis said quietly, and the weight of our shared history hung between us for a moment. At first it was little things. He'd make comments about my clothes, my friends. Then it became suggestions about quitting school to focus on our life together. Before I knew it, I was living in his parents' house, with no job, no education, and no friends of my own. Louis listened without judgment as I unraveled the story of my married life. How Jordan had isolated me from everyone. How his parents had enabled his controlling behavior. How I'd slowly lost myself in trying to be the perfect wife he demanded. "Why did you stay?" Louis finally asked, his voice gentle. I stared at my hands. I thought it was love. And then I thought it was my duty. And then I just didn't know how to leave. A few days later, Dr. Brown called me into her office. Her expression was grave as she set a folder on her desk. "Ruby, I've found something concerning in your test results." She opened the folder and turned it toward me. "There are traces of specific compounds in your system. compounds that are known to cause reproductive issues, including miscarriage. The room seemed to tilt sideways. You mean, I can't tell you how they got there, she said carefully. But these aren't naturally occurring at these levels. Someone would have had to administer them to you, likely over an extended period. My hands were shaking as I took the folder. Is this enough proof? Legally, I mean? It's evidence, Dr. Brown said. But it's complicated. These compounds could have come from various sources. However, she hesitated, given what you've told me about the timing and circumstances, I'm concerned enough that I would support pursuing this further. When Louis picked me up from Dr. Brown's office, one look at my face told him everything. It's true, isn't it? He asked quietly. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. That night, as I sat on the edge of my bed staring at Dr. Brown's report, something broke inside me. The grief for my lost babies combined with the horrific realization that their father, the man I had trusted with my life, had deliberately taken them from me. I cried until my throat was raw, until my eyes burned, until my body shook with the force of my sobs. And when I finally emerged from my room hours later, tear-stained and exhausted, Louis was sitting in the living room waiting, as if he'd known I would need him. I want to file charges, I said, my voice hoarse but determined. Are you sure? Louis asked. It won't be easy. His family has money, connections. I'm sure, I said. He took everything from me, my education, my independence, my babies. I won't let him take my justice too. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal consultations and paperwork. Louis introduced me to Miranda Keyes, a fierce attorney specializing in domestic abuse cases. She warned me from the start that it wouldn't be an easy battle, but she believed we had enough to move forward. The medical evidence is compelling, she explained during our first meeting, but we'll need more to make a solid case. Do you have access to any of these teas or vitamins he gave you? I shook my head. No, he always disposed of them himself once I'd taken them. He said they were too expensive to waste. Miranda made notes. What about witnesses? Did anyone ever see him prepare these drinks or give you these vitamins? I thought hard. His mother, maybe. She was always there. But she won't testify against him. Let me worry about that, Miranda said, a determined gleam in her eye. With nowhere else to go and no income of my own, I continued staying with Louis. He urged me to take my time figuring out my next steps, and when I expressed guilt about imposing, he simply said, "You would do the same for me." To keep myself busy while the legal process slowly moved forward, I began researching how to re-enroll in college. My dream had always been to become a child psychologist, before Jordan had convinced me to give it up. You could do it, Louis said one evening, looking over my shoulder at the university website I was browsing. You were always the smartest person in our study group. I smiled at the memory. That feels like another lifetime ago. It doesn't have to, he said simply. 2 months after moving in with Louis, I received a call from Miranda. Ruby, we've got something. Can you come to my office tomorrow? The next day, Louis insisted on coming with me. As we sat in Miranda's sleek downtown office, she slid a USB drive across her desk. This came from Jordan's mother, she said. I stared at her in disbelief. Catherine? She contacted you? Miranda nodded. Apparently, your husband has been increasingly unstable since you left. He had a violent outburst at their home last week. It scared her enough that she finally recognized what kind of man her son really is. With shaking hands, I took the USB drive. What's on it? Home security footage, Miranda said. From inside their house, including the kitchen where Jordan prepared your food and drinks. My heart pounded as Miranda plugged the drive into her computer and turned the screen toward us. The video showed Jordan in the kitchen, carefully measuring what looked like powder from an unmarked container into my tea. The timestamp matched the week before my second miscarriage. There's more, Miranda said quietly, fast-forwarding to another clip. This one showed Jordan on the phone, his back to the camera. Told you I don't want kids. His voice came through clearly. I never did. Ruby's the one obsessed with having a baby. No, she won't suspect anything. Look, I've handled it twice already. I just need to make sure this third one doesn't stick either. I covered my mouth with my hand, bile rising in my throat. Louis's arm went around my shoulders, steadying me. "Catherine recorded this?" I managed to ask. Miranda nodded. "She says she installed cameras after valuable items started disappearing from the house. She suspected the cleaning staff. Instead, she caught her son." Is this enough?" I asked. "It's enough for a criminal investigation," Miranda confirmed. "I've already been in touch with the district attorney. They want to speak with you tomorrow." As Louis and I left Miranda's office, I felt strangely hollow. Vindication mixed with a fresh wave of grief for what Jordan had stolen from me. "Are you okay?" Louis asked as we walked to his car. "No," I answered honestly, "but I will be." That evening, as we sat on Louis's balcony watching the sunset, my phone rang. The screen showed a number I didn't recognize. "Hello?" I answered cautiously. "Ruby." Jordan's voice sent ice through my veins. "We need to talk. I know what you're doing." I froze, unable to speak. "You think you're so clever, getting my mother involved. But you have no idea what you've started." His voice was calm, measured, which frightened me more than if he'd been shouting. "I'm not going to let you ruin everything I've built. Jordan, I know where you are," he continued, as if I hadn't spoken. "With him. Your college boyfriend. How predictable." My blood ran cold. How did he know where I was staying? "Stay away from me," I managed to say, my voice stronger than I felt. "You don't get to give me orders," Jordan said softly. "Not after everything I've done for you. We're not finished, Ruby. Not by a long shot." The line went dead. I lowered the phone, my hands trembling. "What is it? What's wrong?" Louis asked, alarmed by my expression. "It was Jordan," I whispered. "He knows I'm here, and he knows about the evidence." Louis immediately got up and closed the balcony door, locking it securely. "I'm calling Miranda, and then the police." As he made the calls, I sat frozen, Jordan's words echoing in my mind. "We're not finished." How far would he go to keep his secrets? And worse, what else was he capable of that I didn't yet know? Later that night, after filing a police report and getting an emergency restraining order, I lay awake in bed, jumping at every sound. When my phone lit up with a text, I nearly screamed. "Unknown. Number. You should check your medical records from before we met. Ask your doctor friend about genetic testing. Some secrets aren't just mine to keep." I stared at the message, a new kind of fear spreading through me. What was Jordan implying? What secrets could possibly be in my medical history that I didn't already know? And why, after everything he'd done, did I have the terrible feeling that the worst revelation was yet to come? Jordan's cryptic text message haunted me through the night. By morning, I was exhausted but determined to understand what he meant. As soon as Louis emerged from his room, I showed him the message. His expression darkened as he read it. "This is just another manipulation tactic, Ruby. He's trying to get into your head. But what if there is something?" I insisted. "What if there's something in my medical history I should know?" Louis hesitated, clearly torn between reassuring me and acknowledging my concerns. "Do you want me to help you check your records? I can request them through proper channels." I nodded, grateful for his understanding. "Please. I need to know what he's talking about, or confirm that he's bluffing." Over breakfast, Louis made the necessary calls. "It'll take a few days," he explained. "Patient records, especially older ones, can be slow to retrieve." "I can wait," I said, though patience had never been my strong suit. "In the meantime, I should probably look for a job. I can't keep living off your generosity forever." Louis waved away my concern. "You're dealing with enough right now. Focus on healing and the legal case. The rest can wait." But I needed something to occupy my mind, to feel productive again after years of having my independence slowly stripped away. So while Louis was at the hospital that day, I walked to a nearby coffee shop and asked if they were hiring. The manager, a woman named Diane with vibrant red hair and a warm smile, interviewed me on the spot. "Experience?" she asked. "I worked as a barista through my first year of college," I admitted. "But that was a while ago." "Willing to learn again?" "Absolutely." "When can you start?" 2 days later, I began my first shift. The work was physically demanding after years of suburban housewife life. but the simple joy of earning my own money was worth the aching feet and coffee-scented clothes. More importantly, it gave me something to focus on besides Jordan's threats and the looming legal battle. On my third day at work, I looked up from the espresso machine to find Miranda standing at the counter. "Nice to see you in your natural habitat," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Can we talk after your shift?" 4 hours later, we sat at a corner table as the evening rush died down. "Jordan's lawyer reached out," Miranda said without preamble. "They want to discuss a settlement." I blinked in surprise. "A settlement? You mean they don't want to go to trial?" "Rich men rarely do," Miranda replied dryly, "especially when they know they're guilty." "What are they offering?" "Half of his assets, the house, and a substantial monthly payment for 5 years. She slid a paper across the table. "The numbers are here." I stared at the figures, momentarily stunned. It was far more than I'd expected. Enough to give me a fresh start anywhere I wanted, to pay for my education, to rebuild my life completely. "What's the catch?" I asked, because there had to be one. Miranda's expression confirmed my suspicion. Full confidentiality. "You never speak about what happened to anyone, ever. And you drop all criminal charges. So he just gets away with it? No consequences?" "Financially, there would be consequences," Miranda said carefully. "But legally? Yes, he would walk away clean." I pushed the paper back toward her. "No, I can't do that." "Ruby?" "No," I repeated firmly. "This isn't just about me anymore. What if he does this to someone else? What if the next woman isn't lucky enough to escape?" The very thought made me sick. "I need to see this through." Miranda nodded, a glimmer of respect in her eyes. "I thought you might say that. I'll tell them we're proceeding with the criminal case." That evening, I told Lewis about Jordan's offer and my decision to reject it. "That was brave," he said quietly. "Taking the money would have been easier." "Easier, but wrong." I sighed, exhausted from the long day. I keep thinking about what might have happened if I hadn't connected the dots, if I'd stayed with him and kept trying to have a baby. Lewis reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "But you did figure it out. You got away. That's what matters now." The next morning, Lewis received a call that my medical records had arrived. He brought them home that evening in a sealed envelope. "Do you want me to look through them first?" he offered. "As a doctor, I might be able to spot anything unusual more quickly." I shook my head. "These are my records. Whatever's in them, I need to face it myself." With trembling hands, I opened the envelope and began reading through the documents. Most were routine. Childhood vaccinations, a broken arm at age 12, regular checkups through my teen years. Nothing seemed unusual until I reached the records from when I was 18, just before I'd started college. "Lewis?" My voice sounded strange to my own ears. "I think I found something." He came to sit beside me, scanning the page I held. "It's your pre-college physical," he said. "Standard procedure for—" He stopped abruptly, focusing on a section at the bottom of the page. "Oh, what is it?" I asked, though I could see the notation clearly. "Additional genetic testing performed. This indicates advanced genetic testing was done," Lewis said carefully. "That's not standard for a routine physical. There should be results attached." We flipped through the remaining pages until we found it. A comprehensive genetic panel with one result highlighted. A rare genetic variation associated with recurrent pregnancy loss. I stared at the page, struggling to process what I was seeing. "I don't understand. I don't remember any genetic testing." "This explains why Jordan was so confident in blaming you," Lewis said, his voice tight with anger. "He knew about this predisposition before you were even married." "But how? These are my private records." Lewis's expression was grim. "Good question, and one we should add to the growing list of charges against him." Later that night, unable to sleep, I sat on the living room couch with a cup of tea, trying to make sense of the day's revelations. Not only had Jordan deliberately caused my miscarriages, but he'd chosen me specifically, knowing I had a genetic predisposition that would make it easy to blame me when they happened. But how had he accessed my medical records? And how had he known to look for this specific condition? I was still mulling over these questions when my phone pinged with a new text message. "Unknown number. Now you know." I chose you very carefully, Ruby. Nothing in my life happens by accident. I dropped the phone as if it had burned me, my breath catching in my throat. Before I could recover, another message came through. Unknown number. Ask Lewis about the research program at Westlake University, class of 2015. Then ask him why he never told you. My heart pounded as I picked up the phone again. What did Louis have to do with any of this? He'd been nothing but supportive since the moment I'd called him for help. I heard his bedroom door open, and he appeared in the hallway looking concerned. Ruby? I thought I heard something. Are you okay? I held up my phone, my hand shaking. Jordan texted again. He's bringing you into this somehow. Louis frowned, coming to sit beside me. What do you mean? I showed him the messages. As he read them, I watched his face carefully, looking for any sign of recognition or guilt. What I saw instead was confusion, followed by dawning horror. Westlake University, he muttered. The research program. He looked up at me, his eyes wide. Ruby, I think I know how Jordan got your medical information. How? When I was in medical school, I participated in a research study at Westlake focusing on genetic factors in reproductive health. We had access to anonymized student health records from several universities, including my university. I finished, the pieces clicking into place. Louis nodded. Jordan was in the same program a year ahead of me. That's how he would have had access to the data. But the records were anonymized, you said. They were supposed to be, Louis agreed. But if Jordan somehow figured out which record was yours... He trailed off, looking troubled. That still doesn't explain how he knew it was me specifically, I pointed out. Louis was quiet for a long moment. Unless he was specifically looking for someone with this genetic marker, someone he couldn't finish the sentence. The implication hung in the air between us. Had Jordan deliberately sought me out, knowing about my genetic predisposition? Had our entire relationship been built on his calculated plan to find a wife he could control, and then blame for not being able to have children? I should have seen it, Louis said quietly. When you first told me about him, about how quickly he swept you away, I knew something didn't feel right, but I never imagined... This isn't your fault, I interrupted. None of us could have predicted how twisted he is. We sat in silence for a while, both lost in our own thoughts. Finally, I asked the question that had been gnawing at me since I'd read those texts. Why do you think he's bringing you into this now? What's his angle? Louis's expression hardened. He's trying to drive a wedge between us, to isolate you again. It's what abusers do. They cut you off from your support system. I nodded, knowing he was right. That had been Jordan's pattern from the beginning. Isolate, control, manipulate. We should tell Miranda about this tomorrow, Louis said. The fact that he had access to your medical records, that he potentially targeted you based on genetic information, it strengthens the case against him. Agreed. I hesitated, then added, but there's something else bothering me. How does he know I'm staying with you? How did he get this new number? Louis looked troubled. I don't know. But tomorrow, we'll get you a different phone. And maybe we should consider moving somewhere else temporarily, just to be safe. The next morning, I called in sick to the coffee shop and went with Louis to Miranda's office. She listened intently as we explained Jordan's latest messages and the revelation about the genetic testing. This is serious, she said when we finished. Accessing your medical records for that purpose could potentially be a HIPAA violation, though it's complicated by the research study angle. But more importantly, it shows premeditation. He deliberately sought you out because of this genetic marker. Can we prove that? I asked. We'll need more evidence, Miranda admitted. But these texts help. They show his mindset. As we were leaving her office, my phone pinged again. With trepidation, I checked the message. Unknown number. Tell Louis I always admired his work ethic, especially how early he arrives at the hospital each morning. Always exactly at 6:30 a.m., like clockwork. I showed the message to Louis, watching as the color drained from his face. He's been watching me, he said quietly, tracking my movements. Fear coiled in my stomach. We need to go to the police again. Miranda, who had been reading over our shoulders, nodded grimly. I'm coming with you. This crosses the line from harassment into stalking and threatening behavior. At the police station, we filed another report. The officer seemed more concerned this time, especially when Miranda emphasized Jordan's access to resources and his increasingly erratic behavior. "We'll increase patrols in your neighborhood," the officer promised, "and we'll fast-track the request for a more permanent restraining order." As we left the station, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Every passing car, every stranger on the sidewalk seemed like a potential threat. "You should stay at my place tonight," Miranda suggested. "Both of you, just until we get the restraining order finalized." Louis and I exchanged glances, then nodded in agreement. The thought of returning to his apartment, now that we knew Jordan had been monitoring it, was unsettling. At Miranda's sleek downtown loft, she showed us to her guest room and a pull-out couch in her office. "It's not the Ritz, but it's secure. The building has 24-hour security and no one gets in without being cleared by a resident." That night, as I lay in the unfamiliar bed, I found myself reflecting on how much my life had changed in just a few months. From a trapped and controlled wife to a woman fighting for justice, from isolated and dependent to surrounded by allies. Jordan had taken so much from me, my education, my confidence, my babies. But in forcing me out of his life, he had inadvertently given me back something precious: my agency, my voice, my power to choose my own path. I was just drifting off to sleep when my phone lit up with a new notification. Not a text this time, but an email. From an address I didn't recognize, with a subject line that made my blood run cold. Subject: Catherine Morrison, 1995-2023. With shaking hands, I opened the email. Inside was a single line of text and an attachment. Text: "She tried to help you, too." I clicked on the attachment. It was a newspaper article, dated just 1 week ago. "Prominent local businesswoman found dead in apparent suicide. Catherine Morrison, 58, wife of real estate developer Howard Morrison and mother of financial advisor Jordan Morrison, was found dead in her home yesterday morning. Police are investigating the death as an apparent suicide, though the family has requested privacy during this difficult time." I couldn't breathe. Catherine, Jordan's mother, the woman who had provided the evidence against her own son, was dead, and the timing couldn't be a coincidence. I stumbled out of the bedroom, clutching my phone, and found Louis still awake in the living room. "Catherine is dead," I whispered, showing him the article. "Jordan's mother. She's dead." Louis read the article, his expression growing more grave with each line. "This isn't a coincidence," he said finally. "The timing." "She gave us the evidence against him," I said, my voice cracking. "And now she's dead. Louis, what if he—" I couldn't finish the thought. The implication was too horrifying to put into words. But as Louis pulled me into a protective embrace, I couldn't silence the voice in my head that whispered, what if Jordan had moved beyond manipulating pregnancies to something far more sinister? And if he was capable of that, what else might he do to protect his secrets? Morning arrived with a flurry of activity. Miranda was already on the phone when I emerged from the guest room, her voice sharp with urgency. "I need that autopsy report immediately," she was saying. "Yes, I understand the family has requested privacy, but this is now part of an ongoing criminal investigation." Louis handed me a cup of coffee. "Miranda's been up for hours. The news about Catherine changes everything. Do you really think Jordan—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "I don't know," Louis answered honestly, "but we can't dismiss the possibility." Miranda hung up and turned to us. "The district attorney is expediting the case. Jordan has been called in for questioning about his mother's death. Will that be enough?" I asked. "It's a start," she said grimly. "In the meantime, I've arranged for a security detail for both of you." The next few days passed in a blur of police interviews, legal meetings, and constant vigilance. I took a leave of absence from the coffee shop, too afraid to maintain any predictable routine. We moved from Miranda's loft to a hotel, then to another hotel, always looking over our shoulders. A week after Catherine's death, Miranda received the autopsy report. Her expression was grim as she reviewed it. "It wasn't suicide," she said finally. "The report shows inconsistencies, the angle of the injury, defensive wounds on her hands. The police are officially treating it as a homicide investigation. The room seemed to spin around me. So, Jordan really did... We don't have proof it was him, Miranda cautioned. But it certainly adds weight to our concerns about your safety. That afternoon, Detective Ramirez from the Homicide Division came to interview me about my relationship with Catherine. I told him everything. How she had lived in the same house during my marriage, how she had provided the security footage that implicated Jordan, how she had finally stood up to her son after years of enabling his behavior. Mrs. Morrison contacted me the day before her death, the detective revealed. She said she had more evidence to share but wanted to meet in person. A chill ran through me. But she never got the chance. No, he said simply. She didn't. That evening, as Louis and I sat in our latest hotel room picking at takeout we barely tasted, my phone lit up with a call from an unknown number. After everything that had happened, I almost didn't answer. But something, intuition perhaps, made me press the green button. Hello? Ruby. Jordan's voice, calm and measured as always. It's time we talked directly. I motioned frantically to Louis, who immediately began recording the call on his own phone. There's nothing to talk about, I said, working to keep my voice steady. I disagree. You've caused quite a commotion with these accusations. He said the word with dismissive disdain. It's time to end this charade. The evidence speaks for itself, Jordan. Evidence can be misinterpreted, he countered smoothly. And witnesses can disappear. The threat hung in the air, unmistakable. Is that what happened to Catherine? I asked boldly. Did she disappear because she finally saw you for what you really are? There was a long pause before Jordan spoke again, his voice chillingly soft. My mother had a long history of mental health issues. Her suicide was tragic but not entirely unexpected. It wasn't suicide. That's your opinion. But what matters now is what happens next. His tone shifted, becoming almost businesslike. I'm prepared to be generous, Ruby. $1 million. A clean break. You drop everything and disappear. Start a new life somewhere far away. The offer was momentarily tempting, not for the money, but for the chance to escape this nightmare completely. But then I thought of Catherine, of my lost babies, of who knew how many other victims in Jordan's past or future. No, I said firmly. You don't get to buy your way out of this. Then perhaps we should meet, face to face, one last time. That's not going to happen. Oh, I think it will, Jordan said. Because right now, I'm looking at some very interesting medical files. Files that suggest Louis Thornton might have been involved in some questionable research practices during his time at Westlake. It would be a shame if the medical board received an anonymous tip, wouldn't it? My eyes flew to Louis, who was watching me intently, still recording. You're bluffing, I said. Am I? Room 432, Westridge Hotel. Tonight at 8 p.m. Come alone, or Louis's career is over before it really begins. The line went dead. Louis's face was pale as I relayed Jordan's threat. He's lying, he insisted. I never did anything unethical in that program. I know, I assured him. But he's desperate. He's trying to drive us apart, to isolate me again. We need to tell Detective Ramirez, Louis said. This is another threat, more evidence against him. And then what? I asked. Jordan keeps escalating. Catherine is dead. Who's next? A heavy silence fell between us as we confronted the impossible situation. What if... I hesitated, then continued. What if I did meet him? Absolutely not, Louis said immediately. It's too dangerous. Not alone, I clarified. With police backup. This might be our one chance to catch him in the act, to get him to say something incriminating. Louis looked horrified at the suggestion, but I could see him processing the logic of it. It would be extremely risky, he said finally. Everything about this situation is risky, I countered. But I'm tired of running, of living in fear. It's time to end this. On my terms, not his. As I picked up my phone to call Detective Ramirez, I felt a strange calm settling over me. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't just reacting to Jordan's machinations. I was taking control, setting the stage for a confrontation that would either free me completely or put me in more danger than I'd ever been before. Detective Ramirez was initially reluctant to let me confront Jordan, but the recorded threats convinced him it might be our best chance to gather concrete evidence. "You'll wear a wire," he explained as Officer Evans attached the small device beneath my blouse. "We'll have officers throughout the hotel. If you feel unsafe, say Lighthouse, and we'll move in immediately." In the unmarked police car, Lewis squeezed my hand. "I still think this is too dangerous." "It's the only way to end this," I replied. "I can't keep living in hotels looking over my shoulder." "Promise me you'll use that code word at the first sign of trouble," he insisted. I nodded, though I knew confronting Jordan would require all the courage I possessed. At the Westridge Hotel, my heart pounded as I rode the elevator to the 4th floor. 6 months ago, I'd been a different person. Broken, dependent, believing Jordan's lies about my worth. Now, despite my fear, I felt a strength I'd forgotten I possessed. Room 432 loomed at the end of the hallway. I took a deep breath and knocked. Jordan opened the door immediately, looking much the same. Handsome, polished, the picture of successful masculinity. But now I could see the coldness in his eyes as he looked me up and down. "You came alone," he said, stepping back. "Wise decision." Inside the standard hotel room, Jordan gestured toward an armchair, remaining standing himself. "I assume you're wearing a wire," he said casually. "It's what I would do." I kept my expression neutral. "I'm here because you threatened my friend. That's the only reason." Jordan smiled thinly. "Always so loyal. It's both your greatest strength and your greatest weakness, Ruby." "Let's not pretend we're here to analyze my character," I said, finding courage in my anger. "You wanted to talk. So talk." Jordan moved to the minibar and poured himself a whiskey. "You're making a mistake taking this to court. No one wins in situations like these, except the lawyers." "Catherine lost more than a legal battle," I said pointedly. Something flickered in his eyes. "My mother's death was unfortunate, but not relevant to our discussion." "I think it's very relevant. She gave me the evidence that proves what you did to me, what you did to our babies. Alleged evidence," he corrected smoothly, "which could be interpreted many ways." "There's only one interpretation for putting substances in your wife's food to cause miscarriages," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "And only one for the phone call where you explicitly stated you never wanted children." Jordan sipped his whiskey. "People say things in moments of frustration." "Stop lying," I interrupted. "I know everything, Jordan. I know you accessed my medical records through the Westlake Research Program. I know you chose me because of my genetic predisposition. I know you planned it all from the beginning." For the first time, his composure slipped. "Who told you about Westlake?" His eyes narrowed. "Lewis. Of course. Does he know I'm aware of his own ethical lapses during that program?" "There were no ethical lapses," I said firmly. "That's just another lie." Jordan laughed coldly. So trusting. "Did he tell you about Subject 114B? The test subject whose consent forms were conveniently missing?" I forced myself not to react. This was exactly what Jordan wanted, to plant seeds of doubt about the one person who had truly helped me. "We're not here to talk about Lewis," I said. "We're here to talk about what you did. Why you chose me. Why you deliberately caused me to lose 3 pregnancies." "It wasn't personal," Jordan said matter-of-factly. "I needed a wife who fit certain parameters. The firm expects senior partners to be family men, stable, traditional. But children," he shook his head. "Children are messy, demanding, unpredictable. They interfere with ambition." I stared at him, sickened. "So you deliberately found someone with a genetic predisposition to miscarriage, someone you could blame when things went wrong." "It was efficient," he shrugged. "You were perfect, young, impressionable, no close family ties. And with your genetic history, no one would question when the pregnancies failed." Each word was like a knife, but I forced myself to keep him talking. "But why get me pregnant at all? Why not just use protection?" "Appearances," Jordan replied. "Trying for a family shows commitment, dedication. It earns sympathy from clients, colleagues. Poor Jordan. His wife keeps losing their babies. The investment returns were substantial." I felt physically ill. We were never a family to you, just a business investment. Everyone is an investment of one kind or another, he said, finishing his drink. Some simply offer better returns than others. And Catherine? Was she just an investment too? One that stopped paying dividends when she gave me that security footage? A flash of genuine anger crossed his face. My mother made her choice. She betrayed family loyalty. Did you kill her? I asked directly. Jordan's expression smoothed over. What an extraordinary accusation. I was in a board meeting when my mother died. 20 witnesses can confirm that. That doesn't mean you couldn't have arranged it. He shook his head, almost amused. This is why I brought you here, Ruby, to show you how this plays out. You have some circumstantial evidence, yes, but I have resources, alibis, and very good lawyers. This path leads nowhere good, for either of us. I disagree, I said, finding strength in finally confronting him. I think justice is always a good path. Justice? Jordan laughed. There's no such thing. There's only power and how you use it. He set down his glass and stepped toward me. I'm offering you one last chance. Take the money, disappear, or I will use every resource at my disposal to destroy you and anyone who helps you. I stood my ground. You can't intimidate me anymore, Jordan. Those days are over. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. Nothing is over until I say it is. He moved closer, his voice dropping. Do you think your police friends can protect you forever? Do you think Lewis can? I pushed through my fear. Is that a threat? It's a reality check, he said, reaching out to brush a strand of hair from my face. I flinched away. Don't. Still so defiant, he murmured. I admired that about you once, before you became a disappointment. His hand moved to my shoulder, gripping it hard. You think you've won because you got away, because you found someone to believe your stories. But this isn't over, Ruby. Not even close. Lighthouse, I said clearly, my heart racing. Jordan frowned at the seemingly random word. Then his eyes widened just as the hotel room door burst open. Detective Ramirez and 2 officers rushing in with weapons drawn. Jordan Morrison, you're under arrest for threat and intimidation, violation of a restraining order, and conspiracy to commit assault, Ramirez announced, as one officer pulled Jordan away from me. This is absurd, Jordan protested, his composure cracking. She came to me. I've made no threats. We have the entire conversation recorded, Ramirez said calmly. Are you all right, Ms. Sullivan? I nodded, rubbing my shoulder. I'm fine. As they led Jordan away, he turned back to me, his expression a mixture of rage and disbelief. This isn't over. You think you know everything, but you don't. Ask Lewis about Project Genesis. Ask him what really happened to Subject 114B. Louis was waiting in the lobby, his face tight with worry. He rushed to me as soon as he saw me. Are you okay? I heard the code word and nearly had a heart attack. I fell into his embrace, the adrenaline giving way to exhaustion. I'm okay. They arrested him. Not quite over, Detective Ramirez said, joining us. But we've got him on multiple charges now, and the recording gives us enough to hold him while we investigate Catherine Morrison's death. Jordan's final words echoed in my mind as we left the hotel. Ask Lewis about Project Genesis. Ask him what really happened to Subject 114B. Lewis, I said hesitantly in the car. Jordan mentioned something called Project Genesis, and a subject numbered 114B. He seemed to think it would mean something to you. Lewis's expression grew troubled. Project Genesis was a subdivision of the Westlake research on genetic markers for fertility issues. Subject 114B was one of the anonymous profiles we studied, a young woman with a rare genetic variation. The same variation I had. Jordan is trying to suggest there was something unethical about the research, Louis continued. But that's not true. All subjects gave informed consent. The only unusual thing about 114B was... He looked uncomfortable. Was what? I prompted. Her data disappeared from the system shortly after Jordan left the program. We assumed it was a computer error, but now... Ruby, I think 114B might have been you. Me? How is that possible? I never participated in any research study. Not knowingly, Lewis said grimly. But remember that pre-college physical where they did the genetic testing? That doctor might have been recruiting for the study without proper consent. I tried to absorb this. So Jordan didn't just happen to find my record, he specifically targeted me from the beginning. It's possible, Louis admitted. If he identified you as 114B and then orchestrated a meeting, the level of premeditation would be sociopathic, I finished. That night, I lay awake thinking about everything, the calculated way Jordan had entered my life, the years of manipulation, the deliberate destruction of my pregnancies, and possibly even murder when his mother threatened his facade. I thought about who I'd been before meeting him, ambitious, confident, full of plans, and who I was becoming now, stronger, more resilient, but also more cautious. "Can't sleep?" Louis asked, finding me in the kitchen making tea. I shook my head. "Too much to process. It'll take time," he said gently. "Healing always does." "What happens now with the case?" I asked. "Miranda thinks they'll hold Jordan on the threats and restraining order violation while building the case for more serious charges. The recording gives them a lot to work with." But we still can't prove he killed Catherine." "Not yet," Louis agreed. "But the investigation is ongoing. Jordan made enemies who might talk now that he's in custody." I wrapped my hands around my mug. "Did you mean what you said about helping me re-enroll in college?" Louis smiled genuinely. "Absolutely. Whenever you're ready." "I think I am ready," I said, surprising myself with my certainty. I spent too long letting Jordan control my future. I don't want to wait anymore. 6 months later, I sat in the courtroom as the jury foreman stood to deliver the verdict. Jordan, impeccably dressed as always, showed no emotion as guilty was pronounced on multiple counts: assault, administering harmful substances, violation of a restraining order, and, most significantly, involuntary manslaughter in Catherine Morrison's death. It wasn't the first-degree murder charge the prosecution had sought, but it was enough to ensure he would spend years behind bars. His professional life was over. The firm had already distanced themselves, and his license would be revoked. As Jordan was led away, he looked directly at me for the first time since the trial began. There was no remorse in his eyes, only cold calculation, as if already planning his next move. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Whatever schemes he might devise from prison, I had my life back, and I had no intention of ever letting it be controlled by fear again. Outside the courthouse, Louis waited with a small bouquet of daisies, my favorite, as he'd remembered from our college days. "How does it feel?" he asked, handing me the flowers. "Surreal," I admitted. "But good. Like I can finally move forward." We walked to his car, talking about my psychology classes, my small new apartment near campus, and the future that was finally mine to shape. "I have news," Louis said as we drove. "I got the results from Dr. Brown." My heart skipped. After everything settled, I'd asked Dr. Brown to evaluate my reproductive health, wanting to know if Jordan's actions had caused permanent damage. "And?" I asked, holding my breath. "Everything looks good," Louis smiled. "The substances Jordan used were designed to terminate pregnancies, not cause lasting harm. Medically speaking, there's no reason you couldn't have children in the future, if that's what you want." Relief washed over me, followed by unexpected emotion. The possibility of having a family someday, a real family, built on love and trust, suddenly felt real in a way it hadn't before. "Thank you," I said simply, knowing Louis would understand all that those words conveyed. 1 year later, I stood in the auditorium of Central Community College, watching women of all ages file in for the first meeting of New Beginnings, the support group for survivors of domestic abuse that I had helped establish with my psychology professor. As I prepared to share my story, I caught sight of Louis at the back of the room, giving me an encouraging thumbs up. In the front row sat Miranda, who had become both mentor and friend. "My name is Ruby," I began, my voice strong and clear. 2 years ago, I was trapped in a marriage built on lies and control. Today I'm a psychology student, an advocate, and a survivor. As I spoke about my journey, the manipulation, the losses, the escape, and the rebuilding, I saw recognition in many faces. Some nodded in understanding, some wiped away tears, but in all of them, I saw what had saved me: hope. After the meeting, as Louis and I walked hand in hand through campus, My phone chimed with a text from Dr. Brown. Test results confirmed. Congratulations. See you at your appointment next week. I stopped walking, staring at the message, joy and wonder flooding through me. Ruby? What is it? Louis asked, concerned. I looked up at him, at the man who had helped me rebuild my life, who had shown me what real support looked like, and smiled through happy tears. I'm pregnant, I whispered. Twins. His expression transformed from concern to shock to pure joy. Then he was hugging me, lifting me off my feet, both of us laughing and crying at once. As we walked toward home, our home now, the small house we had bought together, I thought about the journey ahead. It wouldn't always be easy. The shadows of the past might never completely disappear, but they had faded enough to let the light in. I had survived Jordan. I had reclaimed my story. And now, surrounded by love instead of fear, I was finally writing a new chapter, one entirely my own.